Stay right here. So the first school actually was held in 1869, and they didn't have a school building. There was an empty building down where the barn is right now, and it was an empty store building. And so this was where the first school was. Okay, so it was 121 years ago that they had the first classes in Missoula. This lady's name was Emma Slack. Okay, then the next year, apparently they needed that store building for something else, and so the school was moved on over at the corner of Higgins and Main, just up a block from the Vaughn and across the street, and school was held in a log building that year, and Miss Slack again was the teacher. And the next year, in 1871, apparently they needed that building for something, so the school was moved on, and it was held in another building. Now, the very first school classes had 16 students, and I'm guessing the room might have been just about the size of this. And all the 16 kids were in the same room, but they didn't have any desks. There was a table up at the front, there was a chair for the teacher, and then in the back of the classroom there were benches. So the children sat back there and studied, but if they had to write something, then they would come up to the table and sit down and to do their writing. They probably, I'm guessing that when she was going to teach the 8th grade, she probably had them come up to the table, and if she had some 2nd graders, they would come up to the table to have class. Although it doesn't say that. I just know that's what I'd have done if I'd have been in her place. There was notebooks, not like you have. There was a painted blackboard. It wasn't a slate blackboard like you have. It was a painted blackboard. And one thing that happened that Miss Slack told about when she was teaching there, that because it was down on the first floor, and the Indians would come by, and of course they'd never seen anybody in school before, so she'd be teaching, and pretty soon she'd look up and hear it. There would be a face at the window looking in to see what the teacher and these kids were doing inside there. Okay, the year that Miss Slack was teaching on West Main, she met a man by the name of Dickinson, whom she married. And so her name was Emma Slack Dickinson. And there is a school that is named after her. The Emma Dickinson School is named for the very first teacher that taught in Missoula. Well, in 1872, they decided they're just going to be shifting these kids around here all the time to one place and another, and so they were going to build a school building. They bought a lot, a piece of ground to put the school on, and paid $40 for it, and they built a 2-room school building, and they made it out of stone and brick, and that cost $1,700. This building is still here, is still sitting here. It doesn't look the same way anymore, but when you go down to the public library, and the library is on Main and it's on Patty and another. Anyway,
407 East Main Street.
The library, and it's being used as office buildings. And I'm going to go and take a picture of that so that when I talk to the boys and girls, I can show them what the building looks like. Because I think it's interesting when you go down to the public library, if you would know where this very first school was. Now, Mrs. Dickinson wasn't going to teach anymore, but a lady that was hired to teach there, her family, someone in her family died, and so she had to go back and home again to the east, so Mrs. Dickinson taught in this, one of these rooms in this school. It had a great big box stove in the middle of the room. As I say, so maybe the room might have been this big, although I don't know. But there was a big box stove in the center, and it says that over in one corner was a dunce stool, so that the kids who didn't know their lessons, or if they were bad, had to sit on the dunce stool. There was, in another corner, there was a bucket with where the drinking water was, and a big dipper. Now, I heard your teacher tell you not to share the bottle because it isn't sanitary. Certainly what they were doing in 1872 was not sanitary, because whenever you wanted a drink, you'd come up and take a drink with the dipper and you'd put it back in the water, and the next person would come up and use the same one. It's no wonder that a lot of people got diseases and died. The big boys who were in the school carried in the coal and the wood for the stove.
So that was true here, that they did say.
Did you have a bell, Mrs. Frederick?
A bell?
Uh-huh.
I thought it was very much like this one.
This is an old bell that came out of school in, I'll bring it just because it's so loud. This
Yes.
came out of school in Kansas.
Now this is the one, just like I had, that I would ring. And we have recesses like you do, 15-minute recess.
15 minutes.
Yes.
Huh? But you want to remember, if you lived in the rural area, you packed your lunch in a tin bucket, and if you're going to ride a horse to school, there was a special place on the saddle where you stuck the lunch boxes, because you couldn't very well just hold on to that. That flapping around would frighten the horse. It'd run away with you. So you stuck them in a place in the saddle, you know. Huh? Got to. Now, they seem to have colder winters years and years and years ago, back in through here. Huh? And sometimes if you lived, say, in the Dakotas, North and South Dakota, 20, 30 below, and the wind was howling, and you were going to ride a horse to school? Yeah, kids did that in those days. They did. Kids did that in those days. Young children and older children as well. And some children had to walk long distances in winter weather like that. What, honey?
Some people didn't have shoes because they costed a lot. Some people didn't have shoes. And so they had to walk to school without shoes.
Kids are kind of lucky, aren't you? Huh? You either don't live very far from school, or somebody's going to worry about getting you to and from school, right? Huh? Hey, while I think of it, will you please go home and thank your mom and dad tonight for getting you to and from school all the time. You don't have to walk, you don't have to ride a horse. Now wait a minute. Let's go back. Well, I'm glad you do. That's good exercise. Hey, let's go back in this period, will you? Now, if you ride a horse to school, what are you going to do with a horse when you're in school? Ha! There was a barn on the school ground, and you put your horse in there. Your dad has already brought hay and piled, and they weren't bales then. They didn't have any way of baling hay. It was all loose, and you would have to make sure that your horse had something to eat in that barn while you were in school. Now, something else. Who's going to worry about taking out the manure? Ha-ha, before you go home tonight, you fill up the manger with hay, and you clean out the stable so it'll be all clean for tomorrow. You didn't know that, huh? You just thought you got on a horse and rode to school and didn't worry about anything else. Huh? You worry about the horse. And you water the horse. If it's in winter time, you have to break the ice and get some water out of the trough for him. See? Yeah.
Steve Thompson, Liz Rothy, Allison Green, Lucas Gowan. From the 3rd grade, Michael Taylor, down here, and when it says stretch, go way up. Okay, here we go. Stretch together. I missed it. Let's try that one again. Stretch, stretch, stretch up high together. Stretch, stretch, stretch up high together. Now, okay, a little bit of exercise.
Sure, you might have to go into the army to fight for that. So this is our pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Do you understand what that means? Okay. And to the republic for which it stands. A republic is a group of states. A republic. So all the states together, all 50 states, and to all 50 states for which it stands. One nation. In other words, we're not just going to be Montana and California and New York and Florida. We're going to work together as a group cooperatively. And we're not going to become divided anymore. It's going to be indivisible, and we're going to give liberty, which is freedom, and justice, which is abiding by the laws for all people. That's freedom. All right, let's stand up. What you would do if you were in a one-room schoolhouse, this is the first thing you would say. And when we were growing up, we stood facing the flag like this, and you take your right hand, hold up your right hand, and you put it over your heart. Now, most people go over here. Is that where your heart is? It's really right about here. Okay, it's right about in the middle. So you put your hand over there, your heart, and I'm going to read it the first time through, and you repeat with me, all right? All right, let's start. I pledge allegiance to... You want to say it all together? Yeah. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you were in a one-room schoolhouse 100 years ago, you would probably have a prayer after that. And everyone would probably say the Lord's Prayer after that time, but we don't do that now because we don't think it's fair, because some people don't believe in that prayer. So we don't require that is said.
These subjects that'll let you know what's going on pretty much. Now, a school building in the district. Now, when we're talking about school districts, we had around 2,000 of them in Montana at one time. Each of them had its own rural school. And a rural school was something to behold. It was made out of drop siding, and all of them were built practically the same. But the greatest thing they had, of all things, was a bell tower, and on top of the bell tower was the flagpole. And of course the flag was put up as it is in the Paxson School every day, and that went on. But I want to tell you about my first day of school in this rural school, and then we'll tell you more about what the rural school building itself was like. But it was an exciting time. I can remember it yet. My mother made me very miserable before I left home because she put a necktie on me, one of these big bow ties. And she put my shoes back on me. I'd been going barefoot all summer long and so forth. And so I really was looking forward to this first day of school. Alas, we didn't have school at all. Bet you haven't the slightest idea what happened my first day of school. Over the summer, some hornets had decided that up on the bell tower, they would like to build 3 nests. And one of the hornets' nests was built right inside the bell itself. And so when the teacher came out to ring the bell for everybody to come into the classroom, of course the hornets took offense immediately. I mean, to all this clanging in their ears. And they showed their displeasure by coming down into the school itself. And then they showed the displeasure by chasing the teacher out of the building. And then they took after some of us. And so we were running all over the playground. Alas, what to do? What are you going to do about a situation like this? Well, of course, they had to call the clerk of the board, 5-man school board. He came over, and he had to build some fires in pails inside of the school and put what they call soot in there. It was railroad oily rags and stuff like that. It's a wonder he didn't set the building on fire, but he didn't. But it took him all day to get the hornets out of there, and the more he smoked them, the angrier they became. And so I didn't get into school at all, my first day of school. And Of course, I was really heartbroken, but a few years later, I wouldn't have been so heartbroken because I didn't mind being out of school a day here and there.
Anxiety.
There is always anxiety within a first grader the first few weeks of school, sometimes for a bit longer. And they're an unknown to me, and I am an unknown to them. And so it takes a while for us to start working as a unit or a school family. And I have found in the later years here that it really helps to let them know I'm nervous when school starts, and that I had butterflies in my stomach, and I've had school dreams. And that seems to help the children considerably to know that even big people go through this sort of adrenaline flow. And that's helped them. And your other question about the 9 to 5 work world, after the children have been with me a while, it's really great to let them know that school is their job. And then we compare it with their parents' jobs, and we will talk about careers. And what do their parents do? And their parents usually have a 9 to 5 or a 7 to 3 or whatever shift they happen to be on. Mm-hmm. And then let them know their parents are responsible for that amount of time. And therefore, as students, they too are responsible. And that seems to be a good understanding. But
Your memory?
Oh, well, certainly today is one of the high points in 20 years of teaching when we had the one-room schoolhouses. Mm-hmm. And each one of us took first, second, third, fourth, and fifth graders to work together in a one-room situation. We've done a lot of special things over the years. One of the really special events is when we have Native American Day. We usually do an Indian unit in the fall. And we frequently have Indian students who do things in the classroom, such as dancing, that they have learned. And we've also had other Native American dancers, adult dancers, would come to school and perform for us. And I do recall those as being very exciting events. The PTA has really gotten involved in Paxson School in the last 5 to 10 years, and they have done a lot of neat events that have been wonderful for us to have for our students. Last year we had a mountain man come, and he had on all of the clothing you would expect a mountain man to have on. He had all kinds of tools like powder horns and weapons. He showed the children how to load the muzzle of the old-time rifle. So just a lot of those things have been really special.
Okay, follow me in, please. Okay, on your desks is a yellow name tag. Adam Tutsky. Second graders are over in this area. Third graders are over in this area. Fourth graders, fifth graders, and first graders are over here.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was this same school. You know, if I tell you how old it was when I was here, then you'll know that I'm pretty old. It was only 8 years old when I came here. This school. It was one of the new schools when I came. And I'm so sad to know that it's not going to be used after this, but that's the way it goes. I found out something. I learned how to behave in a group of people when I was, and how to follow rules when I was in the first grade. We had a rule that when we went out to recess to play, first of all, we had to go to the bathroom. So now if you were last in line, you never got a swing, did you? Because no way could you get a swing. So I thought, let's forget that. Let's just go on out and get the swing. And after I did that, the teacher, and we all got back in the classroom, the teacher said, Mabel, you will stay after school because you didn't go to the restroom before you went to the playground. And I stood up and said, no. My mother said I couldn't stay after school. So then I was really in deeper trouble because first of all, I didn't follow the rule, and second of all, I was talking back to the teacher. Finally, I stayed after school. And I learned that if you have a rule in some places, you kind of have to obey it, whether you feel like you want to or not.
Well, we played games outside. I was pom-pom pull away, prisoner's base. Now, you play any games like that outside? Because now you see we had no school equipment, nothing like people's things. Yeah, and of course we played ball. They would, they enjoyed racing. We had a lot of races with the youngsters. And then I don't know if you know about a game that's called jazz. Did anyone ever see the game jacks? Oh, that was a game. Do you have some? I was thinking that was a game our youngsters used to play a lot.
When we go outside at recess, we're all going to be playing some games that they might have played a long time ago. And this one is called Tommy Tucker. I need your eyes up here and your attention up here, Charlie. I don't know if you've played this one before. You may have played a variation of it before. This one, the players will stand in a circle. When we get out on the playground, we'll do this. We'll stand in a circle, and then the person who is Tommy Tucker, do you know that nursery rhyme? Tommy Tucker sings for a supper? Okay. Well, Tommy Tucker is inside the ring. He goes around and he holds his right hand and he goes around in the ring because people are holding hands, and he might go, if you two were holding hands, he'd go between you and he'd say, Tommy Tucker, run for your supper. Then you have to go opposite ways around the circle, run as fast as you can. The first one to get back to that place, to your place again. That's right. Tommy Tucker and they get to be it.
They run the same way.
Okay, so that's what we'll be playing when we go out. All right.
guys look at the squirrel before the squirrel put it back to their spot. Everybody understand? Kind of like duck, duck, goose, right. Let's get everybody in our circle. Who wants to be our squirrel? Megan. All right, put those hands back there. Did he get you? No. Okay, you would go back to where John stood up. Okay? Alright, let's see. Who's he going to give that nut to? Put your hands back. Need those hands. All right, he made it. Okay, squirrel, what are you going to do with that nut? Drop it as soon as it comes. Right. Okay. Who could it be? He made it. All right, we have a new squirrel. Get those hands back there. All right, there we go. Good job. They're your shoes, Marguerite. These were terrific.
Whittier School, May 18, 1910. Ronald Pickerel was truant. He had been a prairie schooner tourist attracted by the opening of the reservation. He served a term in jail. The truant officer is instructed to whip him. Early schools in Missoula, Central, Willard, Whittier, Prescott, and one unknown. In the Rattlesnake area, the old Lincoln School served for many years as the focus of educational attainment. Again in the Rattlesnake, these are some pictures of Prescott School, a well-loved grade school in the Rattlesnake area. You can see Mount Jumbo in the background. This is the front of the school. The front of the school, the old Prescott School, was directly south of the present building. This is a picture of the first Whittier School. It was taken roughly in the early 1900s and shows the grandiose cupola on the front section of Whittier School. This school is the first Willard School. Willard at one time was also Montana State University. The photo is roughly in the early 1900s. In addition to the grade schools in Missoula School District 1, there were high schools, and this is a picture of one of the first Missoula County high schools, now known as Hellgate High School. I believe it was Missoula County High School for most of its life.
Let me see. Okay, so the Central School was built in 1884, and when it was built, they had both high school classes and grade school classes there. And so they had a graduating class coming out of the same school where the children of all the kids were going to school. And now in 1890, this is when School District number 3 was formed, and again, Missoula was building and building, so it wasn't long until they built what they called the South Side School, and that, because it was the south side of the river, and that was the Willard School. It was later named the Willard School, and then they had the North Side School, also built in 1891, and that was the Whittier School. So you see, as soon as they got this school district formed, they started building buildings. Yes?
Willard and what was the other one you said?
Willard and Whittier.
Whittier, same, exactly the same as Paxson.
Their buildings actually the same, but Paxson wasn't built until, let me get back up. Okay, this building, the Willard and Whittier, are not the original buildings that were built in 1891. Whittier burned, and so they had to rebuild it, and so it's on the same floor plan that Paxson is. I'm going to skip these other schools down here, but in your school, Paxson, was built in 1922, and this is still the same building. So would you like to find out how old your building is?
Yeah.
You didn't know you were going to have an arithmetic lesson this afternoon, did you? Okay, let's have somebody over here. This fellow right here, okay?
When that happened, did it really matter how old the kids were to go to that school?
No, it didn't matter. The children usually, though, especially the boys, when they got big enough to work, and because most of the kids were farmers, then they quit going to school because they were, so usually it was around 16, 17 years old. But my mother taught 8th grades of school, and she had boys in her 8th grade that were older than she was, because they had quit school, but they had to go help Dad in the spring and in the fall, and they'd only go to school when they could, and then they were interested in getting out of the 8th grade, so they just kept coming. And so they were, I'd say they were as old. Something else that you might enjoy about when my mother taught school. Again, there were not enough desks and so on, and my brother was only 5, and she didn't have a daycare to take him to. She took him to school with her, and there was not enough desks, so they had a great big pumpkin, and he sat on a pumpkin and had an apple box for his desk. Yes. That was my brother, my oldest brother. Yes.
When did you start teaching?
I started teaching school in 1941. I tell everybody I was only 12 years old then. Yes. This gal right here in the pink. Did you have a question?
Yeah. Did the teacher really matter? Did the teacher really care how many kids she had?
And she just accepted everybody that wanted to come to school. I think the teachers that taught were very interested in everybody to get an education. And it wasn't like with you kids where everything's furnished for you. Kids had to buy their own books. They had to buy all their school supplies. Some children couldn't afford this. And they certainly couldn't afford having different dresses to wear every day.
Yes, when I first started here, on the 3rd floor, there was a stage. They put a wall in and made it a classroom, and then we had the multi-purpose room where the library is now. The library has moved several times. They were downstairs on the main floor, then moved upstairs to, which is now a classroom, and then into the present location. a building of this sort, there's hard to make too many changes physically because of the concrete walls. But, let's see. Of course, some of the other changes, not physical, is like adding the hot lunch programs. I can remember when teachers were teaching their own music, art, and PE, where they all have specialized people that come in now to do that. We have in the past housed the Project Excel group, and they are now over at the Jefferson School.
And I was born in 1914, which makes me 76 years old, and I started the school in 1920 as a first grader, and went through high school, of course, as all of you will go through high school, through Eastern Montana State Normal School in Billings, 2 years, then to University of Montana for my bachelor's degree and on for my master's degree. And from that point on, I went out teaching 2 years in Florence Carlton in the high school, was in the U.S. Army in Guam, Leyte, Okinawa for about 2 years in World War II, came back and started teaching in the old Roosevelt School, which is the administration building now, and all of you know that. From that point, I was sent up to the Prescott School, where I was for, three or four years, and then transferred down to Paxson School, where I was for 20 years. And you can see, being in the Paxson School for 20 years, why I don't have any hair up there, and I got a little scar here, you know how it is, kids. But hot lunch. You know what I do? I pick up the newspaper and I read the hot lunch menu. I read it every week in amazement, utter amazement. Why? You haven't seen lunch until you have seen lunch in a rural school where lots of children were very poor. And I've seen them come to school with one boiled potato in their lunch pail. That's all they had. Sometimes it would be a rolled up pancake. But roll up a pancake and stick it in there. And it wasn't what you call corn dog day or this day, and another thing that you people have here when you're fed a very nutritious lunch, no matter what your lot in life is. If you're rich or poor, you're still fed. But in those days, the diet and nutrition absolutely combined were terrible. I mean, and of course, those, you're wondering about poverty. You know why there had poverty in that part of the country? Livestock, if you could sell it at all, sometimes was down as low as $1.100 on the hook. And wheat couldn't be sold at all some years. We were into a depression. It was in the early 20s, I told you, and so forth. And there wasn't any money. That is, a quarter to a child those days looked as big as a pie plate, and because not many of them had quarters and so forth. My mother was a very good, kind person, and every once in a while she'd bake a big, what they called pancake, this big, and put the brown sugar frosting on it and send it up to school because she knew some of the kids hadn't tasted sugar or candy or cake or that kind of thing. And so that was a rough situation for many of the little fellows. Now, state examinations, you people now, I understand, are the fifth graders, is that right? Please, right here. What kind of examinations do you people take at the end of the year? Okay? Yeah. What do you have written?
They check your eyes.
Okay. But anyway, you do have an examination. Now, let me tell you something about examinations. They had state exams when I went to school, in this rural school. They were written exams, and they were tough. And they were at every subject. And the rural school teacher, if she were going to exist at all, she was pretty much measured in the community by if or not her 8th graders passed the state exams. So here, all the rest of us people from grades 1 through, the teacher spent most of her time making sure that the 8th graders were getting theirs. But it wasn't bad. It really wasn't bad because, you know, even in your 5th grade, you'd finish your lessons, and so it's kind of boring, nothing to do, so you listen to the 8th grade history, and you listen to the 8th grade math. it's been called lots of systems by educators. I mean, this thing of listening to others, assisting others. Oh, it's the Bell Lancastrian system and all of those things, you know. But anyway, a teacher was very fearful of those state exams. And don't think that you had a true-false chance, true-false, that you had a multiple choice chance. You didn't have any of those things on those examinations. Came on big sheets of tissue paper, and you might have had 10 choices out of 12, but tell me the questions were tough. They'd say, what was the Kansas-Nebraska bill? 5 provisions of the Kansas-Nebraska bill, and how are they applied by the U.S. government in such and such way? And so there was no way out of it. You couldn't guess, you couldn't do anything. You just sit there and write, and you wrote, and then your examinations were corrected by the county superintendent. And if you didn't pass, you didn't get a diploma. You didn't get to go to high school. You didn't even get a trial in high school. You passed the examinations, or that was it. You were all through. And so you can understand now why this rural school teacher spent most of her time, it would be unfair to say most of her time, she couldn't do that. But she emphasized, excuse me, she emphasized the 8th graders and the way they were treated and so forth. Now,
well, I can tell of several incidents that have happened in first grade that have been just utterly delightful. The humor that goes on within a first grade room, it's almost unbelievable. One time I had a little boy who was out, and he came back the next day and said he had dry leaves. And I truly was wondering what were dry leaves. And I finally found out he had a stomach problem and he had dry heaves. So that poor little fellow trying to explain that to me, but he came off with what he knew. Another time, I think it just shows how a teacher can absolutely keep things moving without losing a step. I had a little girl who was sent to school, and she had spaghetti straps on her dress, and she proceeded to chew them as we started the day, and had undone them. And I said to stand up and let's salute the flag, and her dress fell off. So how to keep my calm and my equanimity at a moment like that? And it was simply to rush over, continue saying the pledge, tie the straps, and we sat down. But those are two of the most outstanding. But every day there is something that causes one to laugh or to chuckle. I think that's why I stay in first grade. It's better than a comic book. It's better than many things. Children come up with wonderful comments, and they're so genuine. I really like little people.
I didn't get to go to school during the winter. We lived on a ranch, and it was a long way from any towns, so I had to go to school in the summer. Imagine, I started school in about March, and then I would go, and it depended. We didn't have the number of days that we had to teach. It depended upon the weather. If the weather stayed nice all through October, and what month are we in now? September. We would go all through October, and then if it were bad in November, we did no school. So maybe you folks have to be in school 9 months. I might be in school 6 months. I might be in school 7 months. So you can imagine how hard we had to work in the months we could be there. And then I'm going to tell you about my first school. I was just 18 when I started teaching. Now, I know your teachers have to go to school at least 4 years. So I only went to school 1 year and 1 summer. And then the school board came to me and they said, Carolyn, would you come teach our school? And I can imagine how it's would think that I would be able to teach that school with no more education. They said, we have a lot of discipline problems. And you know discipline kind of means that the boys and girls aren't the best. But of course they said, I'll tell you, the amount of money you're going to get for doing this will be $100 a month. And now this was back in 1932, 58 years ago this September. And $100 sounded like a lot of money to me. So I went off to teach. And I had about 10 or 11 youngsters and about 7 grades. And here was this 18 there. So that's about, how old are you? About 10? 11. You see, only about 9 years, 8 years older than you. So what was I going to do with these youngsters? Because I didn't have that much education like your teachers. And to get my little first graders started, learning how to read, and then my 8th graders had to take state exams, not just the teacher's tests, but they sent out tests from the state calendar. And then these tests were given by someone in the community to your 8th graders. And there were, in the 7th grade, you took geography. Now you don't have geography. Now what do you have in place of geography? Social studies. And geography and history. We had to have separately in those days. So they had to take geography and health, state exams in the 7th grade. And then in the 8th grade, they had 8 tests that they had to take. All that you take now, excepting that it was history, and then another subject that I know you boys and girls haven't heard of, probably is agriculture. And have you heard of it? Great. And agriculture, of course, would cover all the different kinds of sheep you had on your ranches and the cattle. So my boys and girls then had to take those tests when they reached 8th grade. And they passed. All of my youngsters passed. Now we had no supplies. The only thing I had is my people said construction paper. But we had no construction paper, or some construction paper, no strip film, no, let's see, all of your materials that you have now. We just had the plain books and a little construction paper in your tablets. And I taught 4 years in this school. And then I moved into the broadest schools. Now I'd like to ask you if you'd like to ask some questions as I go, so that maybe I could think of something that you would be interested in knowing about these. Yes, please. Did they get hit on the hand with a ruler? Well, dear, only once, that I had to have a boy, and he was in the 8th grade, and he had gotten out of, had been kind of a discipline problem, let's say. And I tapped him lightly on the hand and told him that we could not have that kind of conduct in class. So then it was quite interesting. You see, when you taught out there in the country, you had to take care of all of your own discipline problems. And the boys and girls didn't like you. You had kind of a difficult time. And you see, I was only 18 or 19. And I had boys in the 8th grade, and this was an 8th grade boy. And he was 50. So you see, we were only about 4 years between us, because I was 19 soon after him. So this one day, when I had to do this, he said, I knew what he was going to do. And he was going to decide that he was going to leave school. So I looked to the door, and I said, now, Jim, if you go out, if you decide that you don't want to stay here, then this means that you won't be coming back here to school. And Jim was about as tall as I was and stronger than I, and he knew it and I knew it. So finally Jim looked at me. We stood there, and you can imagine all the boys and girls in the room were very quiet because what was going to happen. And finally Jim walked back to his seat. He said, Miss Goodspeed, that was my name then. I won't do that. And we had a very nice year.
First of all, I'd like to say there are some past students that I have not seen and would really enjoy seeing them come back. One especially, his name is Niels, and I would love to see him again if he's out there watching television. I have had students come back and see me. Students love to come back and look at the classrooms and see if their old teachers are still there. A lot of students have come back and said that they have gone on to college, and I don't know of anyone that's done anything really notable beyond that, but I'm always really pleased when they come back and tell me that they finished high school and that they're planning to go to college, or they are. I remember one situation where a student came back who had gotten into drugs and had gotten himself out of the drug scene and was trying to get his life back intact. And it seemed like it was very important for him to come tell someone, like a former teacher, that he had made that accomplishment.
There's one other thing that they were doing back in the day when I was a kid in school. They were expecting us to memorize a lot of things. Now, they don't do that so much anymore. And this is what I wanted to share with you. You won't mind if I tell you a little poem that I memorized when I was just about your age, will you? Is it all right? Are you ready to listen? Will you? This is a little story, a story in a poem, or a poem story. I don't care how you call it, huh? This is a little poem about a conversation. You know what a conversation is now? That I had with a cat. Now, you've never talked to a cat, have you? I have. Sure you have. Sure you have. And you could imagine the cat talking back, couldn't you? Yes, and that's exactly what I did, and that's what this little poem is about. Now, there's probably only one word in this poem that you might not know. Scalloped. Did your mother ever fix potatoes with a little milk or cream and some cheese and bake it in the oven? Yeah. Scallop also refers to a mollusk, and scallop also refers to a little thin slab of meat that's been pulverized, pounded a lot. Huh? Anyway, that's one of the things that I'm going to give this cat. Now, put your hands down, and I'll tell you the poem. Now, and if after I'm through, you think that you would be brave enough to ever memorize that poem, why, I'll leave this with your teacher, huh? You ready? A cat came by and asked of me if I would brew her some catnip tea. Why, I'm sorry, I said. I've just none in the house. Oh, but wouldn't you like a bowl of cream? Or a scalloped mouse? No? Perhaps a sparrow on toast? I have it. A goldfish roast. I'm dieting now, sadly mewed she. I must have nothing but catnip tea. Meow. Meow. We were memorizing things like that when I was a kid in school, and we would be expected to get up in front of the room and recite them.
Would you describe the charrette process that was held this past summer?
It was an exciting process, and I'll just read the definition of charrette. It originally comes from a French word meaning on the cart. In 18th century France, architecture students frequently continued to work on their projects as they were literally pulled by the horse-drawn cart to the university for their final critique. This intense work involved the community too as they were going, and so it was a bringing together of the scholarly and the practical, and so that's where the charrette comes from. And as it pertained to Paxson, it brought together various people from various walks of life for 2 days with the goal to discuss where the Paxson School should be located, or what should be done with the Paxson School. That was the ultimate goal. And it involved teachers and administrators, students, people in the community, and it was a very interesting discovery kind of process.
This was a 2-day-long event that took place from 8 to 5 every day?
Right. Pretty intense. One of the highlights were the students who met separately, and they evolved or got together and made up plans about what they thought the future Paxson School should be. And it was interesting, and it was really remarkably like what the adults had been discussing.
And what was the result of these sessions? What plans were formulated?
Well, plans were made that the outcome was that Paxson School should be demolished and a new school risen on the site.
And of course, the biggest change that we're anticipating physically is tearing down Paxson School and building a new Paxson School on site for the next coming year. We hope all the voters will support this.
Isn't the new school slated to be up and running about in '92?
Yes, yes. It would be. It would take 1 year of busing the students presently here over to another school, and at that time they would demolish and then build new on site.
Okay, finally, what aspect of teaching at Paxson has been most satisfying for you?
That's a very difficult question to answer. I can't say that there is one particular aspect, but there would be several. First of all, the students are wonderful to work with. They're generally very enthusiastic, and they're warm, affectionate. They love to learn, they love to read, and they're very exciting to work with. They're very motivating. The parents have been very helpful. Parents like to get into the classroom and help the teachers. Parents have been very supportive for the most part, and I think that's been a really wonderful aspect of teaching at Paxson School. And another thing is the staff. The staff has always been a great staff to work with. People on the staff are congenial and friendly. There's no backstabbing, there's no gossiping, and that has been really wonderful to work with. It's a very positive atmosphere.
And finally, I would like to ask you the open-ended question I mentioned earlier. Is there anything that you would like to add to the interview today?
Well, certainly a lot of people are reading now about the new Paxson School that is being proposed. I would really encourage people to seriously consider that bond issue and to vote for it. We have a lot of great things at Paxson, great students, great staff. We really do need a new building. The building is too small for the needs that we have. And I would like to encourage the voters to seriously consider voting yes for the bond issue so that we can continue to have the wonderful traditions that we have in Paxson and have it in a new building.
Mr. Taylor, how long have you been at Paxson Grade School?
Phil, I've been at Paxson Grade School since January of this year.
And your predecessor, Judy Fenton, the former principal, I believe, served at Paxson for how long?
Judy Fenton has been at Paxson since 1983.
Okay. And your role at Paxson has been?
My role at Paxson has been as the interim or the exchange principal. I've come into Judy's school to take her place as the building administrator, and she's moved into my building back in Australia as the principal of that school.
Would you describe the exchange arrangement that enabled you and Mrs. Fenton to switch positions?
The exchange arrangement is part of the International Teaching Fellowship. It's a program coming out of my home state of Victoria in Australia, whereby 60 educators from that state move to educational settings all over the world. There are 30 of us from Victoria, Australia, in America, and there are 3 of us in Montana. It's a program whereby we exchange jobs, we exchange houses, and many of us even exchange cars.
Thank you. What is your impression of the educational system in this country as compared to the Australian system?
I'm very impressed with the educational system in Montana, and particularly my own setting here of Missoula. One of the most impressive parts of it is the accountability which takes place right from the classroom through to the building administrator. That sort of accountability is not as tight in my home state of Victoria. I'm also very impressed with the specialist programs which take place in Missoula, particularly with the music and the PE and the art. And I'm also extremely impressed with the way the students who are having learning difficulties or who are slow learners are tracked and are kept a very close eye on all the way through their educational career.
And finally, what effect do you think that your year at Paxson will have on your future career in education?
Back in my home state of Victoria, principals are selected by their schools. They are selected by a panel of parents and teachers, and obviously by having some experience in another setting, particularly the American setting, it's going to enhance my my candidature for when I go for promotion to other schools.
Is there anything you would like to add today to the interview?
Yes, I'd just like to say that the 8 months that I've had here in Missoula have been a most delightful time for myself and my family, and I think Missoula and Montana educationally are extremely well off. We've just had the SRA scores given to us last week, and it shows that Montana is in the top echelon of states educationally in the United States of America, and it shows that Missoula is in the top echelon of Montana. And
Bye.